McKinsey, Boston, Bain, Deloitte, KPMG, Accenture. A consulting career is often linked with long-term career success. Corporations and businesses across the world to this day look to consulting firms to fetch up-and-coming management talent. Throughout the corporate world, ex-consultants make up a pretty big share of senior management and also sometimes executive positions. What is it exactly that management consultants are seemingly so good at that it makes them so desirable as hires? And also, are there any downsides? And yes, there are. Let's get stuck in. I've got a whole video on what consulting is and what you do as a consultant, so you can watch that video after this one. The cliff notes are this. Consulting firms hire people, often graduates and undergraduates, with top grades from typically Ivy League schools and put them to work solving problems for companies. Some people stay in consulting forever, but for most, consulting is a thing you do for a couple of years and then you move into an industry role. I've worked with a lot of consultants and non-consultants, and you can usually spot an ex-consultant from a mile away. The first sign is structure and organization. An ex-consultant never forgets a notepad to a meeting. An ex-consultant will never book a meeting and not have an agenda ready for the meeting. A consultant will, as one of their first things when they get a new task, put together some sort of plan with steps and deliverables and will share this plan with their manager or the stakeholders. Consultants are trained to be organized and structured. They rarely wing it or improvise. Next, consultants have, because they've worked with clients, learned that having a right solution is only 49% of the job. An industry expert will get a problem, they'll come up with a solution, and they'll present the solution. And the solution will often get shot down. Consultants will have asked stakeholders for their opinions prior to even designing a solution. They will spar with the most important stakeholders during the design process, and before the final solution, they will have chased down their tacit acceptance from those key stakeholders. By the time they walk into the boardroom or the steerco, they usually already know that their suggestion is going to be approved. At the micro level, they send update emails all the time. You're never in doubt about when something is going to hit your desk. And usually they're pretty sociable. They invest in getting to know people and use those relationships to their advantage. And they do it well because part of a consultant's job is sales. So building relationships and leveraging those relationships is something that is at the core of what a consultant learns to do. Hopefully you're learning something from this video. Hopefully the structure is also appealing to you. If you enjoy my content and you're new here, please consider subscribing. It's hugely appreciated. The button, just down here. Part of being able to solve complex problems is intelligence, but a lot of it is about systematic and being structured. Consultants are in part hired for their aptitude for problem solving through quick thinking, but specifically, the methodology for solving problems is what gets built on top and what makes them really strong at this. Consultants are often given some random task in an industry or a field they know nothing about. Their job is to quickly understand a problem, figure out how to analyze the origins of the problem, and build some sort of framework for solving that problem. There are two keys to this. The fact that the problems are complex and unclearly defined, and the problems are within fields that the individual consultant might know very little. I've seen strategy consultants with 2 years of experience in consumer goods get put on a public sector, governmental, military procurement project, something they knew nothing about. But with the right methodology and a systematic analysis, they were able to quickly get a handle on the task at hand. Experts are often terrible at approaching a broader problem. They're also not as good at putting together a solution approach that others understand. And that's where the consultants excel.
This is Mike, and this is Mike's dog, Vino. Mike, not Vino, is a partner and associate director at BCG. This is Mike's suitcase. Mike travels 2 nights a week. Mike balances his work life by running, as in 10 races a year, as in racing on mountains.
There was a McKinsey partner back in the 80s who said, "We hire insecure overachievers," and is largely true to this day. These are people that are incredibly ambitious and also very willing to put in a lot of effort. Consultants are usually worked really hard. The deadlines are tight, the hours are very long, and when you're working, that's all you're doing. They do this for extended periods of time and learn to function in these high workload, high stress environments.
Mike balances his work life by running, as in 10 races a year, as in racing on mountains.
Hiring a consultant pretty much guarantees you're getting a person that has a higher tolerance and a higher willingness to go the extra mile. It's a terrible phrase, but for consultants specifically, it happens to be true. The structure, the communication, the work ethic, the systematic approach to problem solving usually makes them very good at project coordination and management. There's one thing that a lot of specialists are really bad at. It's stepping out of their subject matter knowledge and being able to run a project. All the structure and planning and coordination and stakeholder management is something that subject matter specialists are not exposed to, usually in their normal day-to-day jobs. Consultants also rarely initially have the choice of what they want to work with. You get the projects that are available when you're on the bench. So today you're doing cost-cutting analysis for a pharmaceutical firm, and tomorrow you're helping the government put together a tender for buying $20 billion worth of military equipment. Consultants are initially jacks of all trades. They have to be able to adapt to clients' needs. They have to adapt to industries and problems and different demands. This also makes them very plug and play in a lot of roles in the industries. They end up as problem solvers when the problems are unclearly defined and not isolated to a specific subject. So those are the things that they're almost all good at. And then there's the things that they're not so good at. For the first 2 to 5 years in consulting, I'd say you're not an industry or subject matter expert. You're a generalist. You're a jack of all trades. A consultant with 2 years experience from Deloitte may have been 1 year on a finance project, 6 months in the public sector, and 6 months in pharma. Some may even have been consistently staffed in one industry, but really, industry insight, real in-depth understanding of an industry or a field takes a longer time. A year 3 Boston consultant is not going to bring fall off your chair insights into your industry. But the consultant will bring all those other things we talked about. And often when consultants do become experts, they rarely become specialists. And by that, I mean a consultant who's been working with the financial sector for 5 or 10 years understands how banking or insurance or corporate finance works, but it doesn't make them a good actuary or some other kind of specialist. You're not finding the best coder in consulting, but you'll likely find a consultant who understands the way tech and tech companies function. They know how a house is built. They know what the individual workmen contribute with and how they make money, but they're not the best painters or plumbers or electricians. They're also not by definition in possession of a strategic mindset. Obviously, Boston Consulting, McKinsey, and other strategy firms are more likely to have strong strategic thinkers. It's not always a given though. Usually consultants are capable of lifting themselves out of the details, the operational problems, and viewing things from at least a kind of a mid-tactical level, taking into account a broader perspective than just, the narrow problem at hand. But strategy, real strategic thinking, real visionary thinking is a lot rarer. Some have it, but it's not a given at all.
Leadership is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
And then there are the things that they are really not good at. Leadership of normal people. Did you ever watch the Netflix documentary about Michael Jordan? Did you see how he raised the expectations and the standards for the entire team?
Was he a nice guy?
And Jordan is fouled.
He couldn't have been nice.
So I pulled people along when they didn't want to be pulled. I challenge people when they don't want to be challenged.
I think that there were 2 reactions to Michael Jordan's way of working with his teammates. One is a profound respect and admiration for the dedication, the effort, and the high bar he set for himself and those around him, and also a respect for the results it led to. And the other reaction? He's an a-hole. Still respect for the results created, but really don't like the guy. Now, I'm mostly in the first camp. The Chicago Bulls were a small team of some of the very best, most ambitious, and relatively well-paid superstars at the time. The rules are different there, but it's different in most jobs. 80 to 90% of most people in corporate do not want to work 90 hours a week. They do not want their lives to be about their jobs, and they just don't want to go the extra mile unless they are rewarded for it. Now imagine getting a boss that's a former consultant.
Mike balances his work life by running, as in 10 races a year, as in racing on mountains.
Ex-consultants get results, but they are, in my experience, best at leading high performers. They don't know how to deal with normal people with normal lives and a normal approach to work. They can be demanding. They can sometimes be perceived as micromanaging. And more than anything, and I've seen this a million times, they don't understand normal people and they have a really hard time adjusting. Consultants also consistently overdo things. Everything becomes a project and a plan and a process with meetings and stakeholders. They are incredibly bad at 80-20 or even just half-assing it. Why? Because as consultants, they are expected to deliver a perfect result to a customer. Specialists and experienced industry people know when something doesn't need to be perfect. Consultants inevitably often over-engineer and overcomplicate problems in a lot of situations. When I ask a specialist to check if a couple of managers support the approach, they'll have a chat with a couple of people and say yes or no. The consultant, they'll put together an online survey and they'll do focus groups and 15 interviews, including a structured questionnaire, all of which they'll report back in an 11-page slide deck. Pragmatism and compromise is not always something they've learned in their time in consulting. Consultants learn to understand problems quickly, but sometimes they lack the detailed understanding of how something works and why something is difficult. It's the difference between the consultant who sees a problem, makes a plan, proposes a solution, and rolls out a solution with change management and all that kind of stuff. And it just doesn't work as expected, versus the expert who says, "Yeah, well, we tried this 5 years ago. The problem is the legacy hardware. We can't fix that. And when you start fiddling, it's just going to fall apart." The consultant knows how a television sends a signal to the screen and understands the principle of why it might not be sending the signal. The specialist knows to first try and replace the HDMI cable. These negatives, the leadership challenges, the lack of industry insight, and the tendency to overdo it are not really a problem for firms initially, because they're a byproduct of all those strengths that they bring to the table, because those strengths are incredibly valuable to have. Over time, they can learn the industry. Over time, they'll develop as leaders, hopefully at least. And overdoing it? Well, as an individual contributor, most managers are not going to complain about somebody overdoing it, at least not initially. Finally, this theory that consultants are by definition the smartest people in the room is just not true. Obviously, there are smart people there, but their key strengths are the methods and the work approaches they apply. It's that part that initially makes them shine. People like a well-structured PowerPoint with a clear, understandable argumentation. And the key is credibility. Justice Alito of the US Supreme Court once said of hiring his Ivy League legal clerks, and I'm paraphrasing, "Are they the best? Maybe not always. But when I hire someone from Harvard or Yale or Stanford, I know exactly what I'm getting. They're trained in a very specific way, to think in a specific way, and to work in a specific way. I know what I'm getting." So is there some college somewhere with a better faculty? Probably. Are there some stars somewhere else? Sure. But it's riskier to try and find them. And that, to me, is emblematic of what companies look for when they hire consultants. They're not necessarily the smartest people in the room. But what you do get is people that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years have been working in a unique setting, which has given them a set of skills that a lot of specialists are just not exposed to.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
While the specialist has been getting better and better at coding or recruiting or controlling budgets, the consultant has been getting better at practicing project management, stakeholder management, general problem solving, and has gotten used to huge workloads, short deadlines, and high expectations. Consultants are by no means perfect, but those skills are desirable, and that's why they get bought. Consulting is one of the best places to learn those generic skills. The old adage is, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but people forget the rest, which is, but oftentimes, it's preferable to a master of one. So that's the full quote. The generalist is super desirable, and that's what you get. What's your experience with working with consultants? And if you're a former consultant, what was the most challenging about moving to the industry? Share in the comments. Remember to subscribe. See you soon.